and welcome to another episode of the Cornucopia of Tales and Tellers. Tonight we have 5 magical storytellers with us. So joining myself, Simona and David, we have Geraldine. Hello, Geraldine. How are you?
I'm fine, Alan.
Thank you very much for joining us. And we have Rasheedat as well. Rasheedat, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much, guys, for joining us. We really appreciate it. Geraldine, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?
I'm Geraldine Nanjala. I'm a teacher, a primary school teacher, and I teach children from about 7 years up to 14 years. But I majorly teach those ones from 10 years up to 14. The subjects are distributed through the classes. My name, Geraldine, was given to me by my mother. And Nanjala is a name from my tribe. I come from Western Kenya, and we name according to seasons. So the time I was born, there was drought. So Nanjala means hunger. That is my name.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That's really fascinating.
Yes. So we name according to seasons. I started teaching 30 years ago when I was about 25. That is when I started teaching. And I have 3 years to retire. And this is when I've discovered that there are so many good things that I missed early enough. And that was due to lack of exposure and time and environment where I've been. So the school I teach is called Ndege Primary School. Ndege means aeroplane. So there is an airstrip in that area. So the school bears the name of the airstrip. That's all about me.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. That's so interesting with the naming.
Fascinating, Geraldine. Can I just ask you the name of your tribe?
I come from Luya community, and in Luya community, there are about 16 dialects. So my dialect is Bukusu dialect. Bukusu. We come from Western Kenya, near Mount Elgon, on the slopes of Mount Elgon, bordering Uganda. Yes.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And we're also joined by Rasheedat tonight. Rasheedat, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi. Thank you. My name is Rasheedat Sadiq, and I'm a teacher. I teach a wide range of learners. I have adult learners who I tutor one-on-one. Then I have the young learners, primary school, who I teach at my full-time job. Once in a while, I hold workshops for teens or anybody else that would be interested, basically. Thank you.
Rasheedat, I've got to ask you about where you are, and I also want to just say something about your family, because maybe you didn't want to talk about your family, but yesterday at the day before yesterday at the World Storytelling Cafe, your youngest daughter, Radia, just told the most amazing story, introducing the wider world to her experience, her older sister's experience, your experience of Ramadan. And it was the most wonderful example of personal storytelling. So can you just tell us a little bit about you and your family and where you are?
Yeah, okay. So that story wasn't really a personal story, but it is something very related to what we would have in our family. So I have a beautiful family. I have 4 children, and the 2 youngest are girls, and they fell in love with storytelling the same way I did, and they've been appearing on the World's Storytelling Cafe programs. My older second born, Hamid, has also appeared once in a while. He's a bit shy, but he's also interested in storytelling. And my oldest actually is quite vocal, but because the program was initially for those 18 and under, he never really joined the wagon, as the case may be. But I may bring him along one of these days. And yeah, it's lovely that we can share stories together. And it's always interesting on Tuesdays how we start to brainstorm what story am I going to tell today? I think Rohana is the best at creating stories. She invents stories and she does them wonderfully. Radia mostly takes stories from books she's read and sometimes she adds a little bit. And yeah, that's the joy that getting to know David has actually brought to our family.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, they're absolutely wonderful.
Yes,
And
and at the moment, I live in Abuja, Nigeria. That's the capital city of Nigeria. I'm from the west of the country, but Abuja is somewhat in the north, and I have also lived in the south. So I've been around, and it's really nice to have experienced various cultures. Just like what Geraldine said, in Africa, we have so many different cultures fused together in a relatively tiny space. So it's a beautiful thing to have lived in so many parts of the country.
thank you, Rashidat. And maybe let's stay with you. I've got the same question for both of you. So Rashidat, let's start with you. What's your interest in storytelling, and how did this interest start and develop?
Okay, so it's really interesting for me when I think about it. Somehow a stroke of luck, but I also like to think that it's because I took a bold step. So I've been teaching English now for about 10 years. I was into other things before I became an English teacher. So I belong to a number of associations. And on one of the groups, WhatsApp groups of one of the associations I belong to, Harry actually just put out a call that David was interested in gifting a space to African teachers or to someone in our group. And he gave us a sort of criterion that we should send our oral stories and he would pick maybe the best or maybe the first. I don't know what his criteria exactly for choosing would have been. But apparently, I think I was the only one from our group that sent in a story. But it intrigued me because I've always loved stories. I've always loved folk tales, but I didn't get so much of an opportunity to learn them when I was younger. I didn't really hear them from my grandma. I did hear them from my parents once in a while, but there were just a few of them, and I remember those few very vividly. And so I sent him one of the stories that I was told. And one beautiful part of Yoruba stories, I'm originally Yoruba, that a lot of them come with song, with refrain. That's something I also loved about our storytelling culture. Sometimes I don't even remember the story, but I remember the song. So I sent a story that had a song in, and I was invited to the press course. And then after the press course, I started really actively thinking about how I could use storytelling in my classes and how I could share the gift of storytelling with other teachers.
I'm astounded to hear you say that you were kind of new to storytelling when you did Crest, because when you came to Crest and subsequently knowing you've got such a wealth of stories from Yoruba and other traditions. You know so many stories. So it's hard to imagine that you were coming with a wealth of folk tale knowledge, weren't you, to Crest?
Yes, to an extent, because I've always been an avid reader. And before the storytelling classes, I was a proponent of read alouds in all classes. Like I teach as high as year 9, that's like junior secondary. And in all the classes, I believe in reading aloud. And I always read with action, with activity. So moving into storytelling wasn't much different. The beauty of that was just that I could put down the book, like David said, the barrier of the book wasn't there anymore. And I could use some of my own words. With the storybook, I had to stick with whatever the author had written. But with the stories, I could add some of my own words. I could add words that would make connect to the students better.
Thank you very much, Rasheedat. And Geraldine, what about you?
I started getting interested in stories when, in my culture, stories are told by grandmothers, aunties, and my grandmother was a great storyteller. She came to live with us because she was ailing, and during her free time, she could tell us so many stories. So when I went to school, my CRE teacher used to introduce to us stories about David in the Bible, and he never used to write notes. He told us stories, and I loved the subject so much. My English teacher, once in a while, especially when I was in grade 4, she told so many stories about animals, and I loved those stories. When I moved on to secondary school, my English teacher, she was called Sister Fintan. Sister Fintan used to tell stories, and she would come with a book, read the first paragraph of this book, and then she would let you go and read. She would say, go and find that story in the library. And we all rushed to look for that one book. The person who got it earlier would read the story, and we would sometimes even steal the book. And after you finish reading, you throw it anywhere and it will be picked. So my Kiswahili teacher also was a very good storyteller. So I loved those stories. And I wanted to be a teacher so that I would teach using stories. And this is exactly what I got. My mother was not telling us so much stories, but she told a few. So I picked those stories from there. I also became a librarian, a teacher librarian in my school, and I come across many stories that I read. And I love reading with children the simple storybooks so that they can come to the library, and they love coming to the library because of stories. Sometimes when I get time, I read to them. So that's how I came to be interested in stories, through my teachers and through my parents and my grandmother. Yes.
Have you found, Geraldine, a joy in being able to tell, for example, have you told some of the stories from like when you were young? Stories you were told when you were young and you're now telling them to a new audience or a young audience?
Yes, I've told
passing
them
on.
Yes, I've told them the stories. I've managed to tell the students the stories. And the greatest time I got when I got into CREST, that is when I passed on to the adults, when we were training with David.
Can I ask you, Geraldine, to expand on that? Because you said that when you did the CREST course, the Creative and Engaging Storytelling for Teachers course, did that somehow act as a spur to encourage you to share storytelling ideas and skills with other teachers that you know?
Yes, when I went to CREST training, the first one, we were 6 of us, and all of us were adults. I did not know that adults would enjoy stories for young children. until when you encouraged us to tell those stories, those folk stories. During the second time, we were also telling it to the adults. And it was a good experience. It was a wonderful experience to me. And I discovered that adults also enjoy stories for young children. Yes.
When you say adults, are you talking
Yes.
about are you talking about adults generally, or are you talking specifically about teachers?
Adults generally. Yes.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Geraldine, you have we just want to talk about each of your projects at the minute. You won a British Council competition with your students. Do you want to tell us about that? Could you tell us about that?
I belong to Africa ELTA, and one time, it was in the year 2021, I saw it was posted on the wall, a project of Co-op 26, and it was about a video competition. And the topic was my story, my school story, or my class hero. So it was one day to closing school. And when I went through the advert, I found that we could do that project with the students because we practice. I'm a patron of environment in my school, and I found that we would manage it. So I read it and told the children that we should tell about the school story because it would be difficult for them to talk about me. So I found it better that they talk about their school. So I wouldn't write anything. So it was about you take 5 students who would participate. So I took 5 students who could speak properly and who had expressed themselves well. And I asked one of them to talk about the school when he first entered the school. And the second one to connect that story, what happened next. And the third one to connect to the second one. And then the fourth one could connect to the third one until how the school looks like now. So I've been in the school for a long time. This is my 12th year in the school. And when I entered the school, it was very dusty. So I asked them to talk about that because right now we have planted so many trees. So I left them. After giving them the instructions, I just left them to do it. So when I came after about 1 hour, I asked them to rehearse, and I found that they had already connected the story. I only needed to help them. So the following day, it was raining a lot, and I asked one of the teachers to help me take a video. So the weather was bad the whole day. So I asked the teacher, that was the deadline for that video, so we could try as much as possible to complete that work. So when the teacher was taking it, was raining and pausing, raining and pausing. So I didn't know that the rain was making the video more attractive. I didn't know that we would emerge one of the 10 that were needed. It was a story about their school. Yes.
I love that video. There's so much joy in it, and you're right. The rain just makes it so incredibly special. It really
Thank you.
celebrates what you've achieved in your school, turning a dusty environment into a beautiful green space. It's a kind of model for the world.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember watching that video. Actually, David suggested it to me, and I remember watching that video and seeing all the plants and the rain, and
Yes.
imagining like your school in Kenya, and like I've never been to Africa, and
Yes.
I don't know, just imagining that tropical rain and all the green,
Mhm.
it was just fantastic. It made it really special.
Thank you. Thank you. Mm.
And so we talked a little bit about a project that Geraldine did with her students. And Rashidat, I know that, and I follow your page on Facebook, that you work under the name of the Emoligen teacher. I just wanted to ask you if you could explain, first of all, the name, and secondly, what you do through this page and the name.
Okay, so the Emolligent teacher is an amalgamation of two words, emotionally intelligent and teacher. So emotional intelligent became Emolligent. And that was just because halfway through my teaching career, I realized that emotional intelligence as a skill is something that is not yet well appreciated around me. I'm not sure how it is in other parts of the world, but Africans and Nigerians, we tend to be very serious. We believe in, working hard, being strong, not really talking about our emotions. So I decided that I would be a teacher that would show a lot of empathy in my classroom. But I didn't want to do that alone. So I started it started with the Facebook page. I started that page with the idea on sharing tips about what emotional intelligence is, how to become more emotionally intelligent, how to bring in emotional intelligence into the classroom. So I was talking about things like agency, about finding learners' needs, a lot of stuff around that. And as I progressed, it became a business name. So I went into teacher training and I decided that, okay, it's still a good name for my teacher training business. So I had that incorporated with our Corporate Affairs Commission in Nigeria as a business name. I have a website which isn't running so smoothly yet, but I started putting things in place to make it work better. But one beautiful thing that happened after I joined the press course was I started thinking of how to use stories to drive my message. So the very first program, I did a program for children. It was free of charge, and it was called Social Emotional Learning Through Stories. So I had a day where we looked at stories with the children, and we talked about the lessons from the stories. We talked about some of their experiences, if they ever had an experience from that story, things like that. A while later, I joined a challenge, a storytelling challenge. I was supposed to tell a story every day for a month. And I decided that my stories would be EI Through Stories. That was the name of the series. So I did succeed in telling, I think, about 30 to 40 stories. I didn't make it every day. It was a 45-day challenge. I didn't make it every day of the 45 days, but I think I told about 30 good stories, and they're all up on Facebook and on YouTube at the moment. And I love that. One other interesting thing about the challenge is that we were kind of limited to time. We're told not to tell it more than 3 minutes. So I had to look for all these interesting stories and really try to miniaturize them. That was interesting for me to do. So the joining the Crest and identifying as a storytelling teacher has really helped me in my work as someone that wants to spread emotional intelligence. And the last course I did, I haven't been able to do the project yet, but my project was something about stories of teaching heroes. So I wanted to create a program where I would have a group of teachers tell their stories and just realize that they are heroes. Sometimes we don't feel as if we matter so much, but when we tell our stories to ourselves, we see how much we actually matter and how much we've actually done. I do have another project that is not so linked to that name. It's called the Mobile Reading Room. I take books to underserved communities. And another interesting thing I started doing with them, because that, like I said, started from my read aloud culture, is that I've also started introducing storytelling in those sessions. So it's not just read alouds anymore. We also have storytelling. And it's also beautiful that I'm able to put the skill into use in almost everywhere I go. I tell stories almost all the time. Thank you.
Can I check something for clarification, Rasheedat? That context, the mobile reading room, which languages does that involve? Is it English and African languages, or is it specifically about English?
It's specifically about reading. So not necessarily reading only in English. However, I don't speak the local language in the area that I operate. So a lot of the work I do is in English, but some of the children are able to help me with translations, and some of the other volunteers that come in to join are also able to help with teaching reading of the local language. So it's kind of a mix of the two, but we do more of English, possibly because I don't speak the language, or I don't know, or possibly because English is the lingua franca in Nigeria.
Thank you.
I think as well, one of us have to say that Simona, I don't think you were there that night. I was in a listening mode. One of you guys might want to correct me of when it was, but a couple of months back it was a Saturday night on Africa Elta, where you guys spoke about storytelling and stuff. Would anybody like to tell us a bit more about that? That was a fantastic night, by the way. I was on listening mode. But it was just an absolutely wonderful night of a mix of stories from all over the continent, and it was just very
might have been
enriching.
The best online storytelling festival I've ever been part of, and it wasn't even called a festival.
Yeah, I would back that up. It was absolutely phenomenal to be on listening mode and just enjoying. I actually think I had popcorn. No, I didn't. But no, I had a cup of tea, and I just enjoyed absolutely every second of it. Would any of you like to give everybody else a bit more detail on that?
It was kind of, I'll just briefly start off. It was kind of an idea that I had, and I shared that idea with Rasheedat and Geraldine and the other participants who have done the CREST course. And also I talked to Dr. Harry Kucha, who we've also already mentioned, who's originally from Cameroon and is the former president of IATEFL, the International Association of Teachers of English as a Foreign Language, and who is himself a fantastic storyteller. And we just all agreed, we all said yes. We all said, we've got to do this. But please, Geraldine and Rasheedat, tell us about your experience of doing that and what it meant.
Okay. When I joined Africa Elta, it was just through curiosity that during the time of COVID, our schools were closed. We stayed home for 9 months without going anywhere, just in the compound. So as I was going through my phone, I came across Africa Elta, and it was a teacher association. So I requested to join. I didn't know where it was, but there was no response. So I kept on asking them, can I join? How do I join? How much is paid? And lastly, the response from Amira, who is the president, said that you can join, but there is no payment. You are already a member. So I started communicating with them, and the president, Amira, suggested that they have a project about wanting to promote or to encourage female classroom teachers to be international conference presenters. And they wanted 8 ladies. So there was a questionnaire and we were to fill. So we filled the questionnaire and I let it go like that. So after about 3 weeks or 1 month or so, there was a reply that, Geraldine, you have qualified, you are one of the 8. So I thought that that was wonderful because I didn't know it was as serious as that. So in our language, we say, you have dipped your legs in water, so you have to bathe the whole body. So that is what happened. And after the course, which we went through for about from October to January, I was partnered with Sarah, who was my mentor. Sarah comes from Austria. It was a wonderful experience. And I presented about how to make a library attractive for young children. That was my final presentation, how to make a library attractive to young children. So after that presentation, that is when now I think I got exposed and found David. So from that time, I was handed over to David so that I could be one of the CREST trainees. That was a wonderful thing for me. We told stories and I enjoyed very much because each time or every evening, I had to now go back and start thinking about stories that I would tell. Because there was no other opportunity where, apart from my classroom, there was no time to tell an adult a story. That's why I say telling a story to adults, well, that was my first experience since long time. So to me, it was a very good opportunity for me to start now thinking even about my late grandmother, reminding myself of the stories she told us. So the training, after training, I kept on thinking of how I would now encourage my other colleagues to use these stories as a method of teaching young children, because it keeps reminding and refreshing the minds of children and even adults. Because I remember the first story David told us in the first CREST, it was about the man who was who had gone to borrow a pan. And after the story, I came and told my daughter the story, and I told my classroom students about the story. So it keeps refreshing the mind. Yes.
And then, Geraldine, as Alan was asking you, just a few months ago at the Africa ELTA storytelling webinar,
yes,
presented to teachers, not just in Africa, I mean, mostly in Africa, but there were teachers, including Alan, around the world who joined and were learning from you about storytelling and language learning?
Oh, to me, I was very excited and felt honored because in that webinar, we learned, we told stories, and in those stories, it was an experience that I felt that I had something to share with teachers. Because in telling the stories, I felt that I did not just benefiting myself professionally, I was helping the others professionally and reminding them that it is good to tell stories to young children. In the stories help them to bond with the children. The stories will also help the children to remember and to learn vocabulary. Because in repeating all the time, you keep on repeating, they'll grasp the words. They will know that that word means something instead of getting an object. So by repeating, they will know that word means something. My experience also with the teachers, when I was telling the stories that time, the story I told about Mangoto was to make the teachers and to remind the teachers that they have to remember the story teaches morals to students and even to adults. So I felt honored that I have something to share with the teachers.
And more than that, when you shared the story of Mangoto, which you learned from your grandmother, I think you were demonstrating to teachers that it can be very positive to be sharing stories from your own cultural heritage with the children that you're working with. And you're not saying to other teachers, you should tell Mangoto, but you can go and find stories from your cultural heritage, stories that you've learned in your communities and your families. And they will think, oh, yeah, of course we can do this. It's a very effective way. What do you think?
So it is important, but unfortunately, you find that teachers these days, I don't know whether everybody, all the older people have died, stories are not being told anymore. So it is very good that the training, at the end of the training, that time of the webinar, we encourage that it is good to pass stories from one generation to another because it is dying out. So we need more teachers to come up in this crest coast so that they can revive and continue passing stories from one generation to another and to pass stories to children.
But they don't need the crest course, Geraldine. They need you. And you're doing it because you told me just a few weeks ago that you are sharing your knowledge, not just online, but you're doing teacher training workshops locally. Isn't that right?
Yes, I did it. And I even posted the pictures to you. Yeah, I addressed about 200 teachers who I faced one-on-one. The first group was 100 teachers. The second group was about 115 teachers. And I was telling them about the importance of stories. And they were positive, very positive, because where we live here, we have many tribes. So each one of them can give a story that they were told by their parents or from their environment. Because these teachers are of my age, about 50 years and above. And that we were told stories. Others who are coming up now are not being told stories. So it is us teachers to help the children pass the stories to them. Yes.
Completely agree. That's on us. Yeah.
Yes.
Those are fantastic numbers, Geraldine. 100, nearly what, 240, 250 teachers over 2 sessions. Those are phenomenal numbers.
Yes, they organize that way because we don't meet oftenly. We meet once in 2 terms or once a year. So that's why they gather many teachers at the same time. My other colleagues went to other 3 groups because all of them were about 550 teachers. And we have a project. I'm the chair lady now of Rift Valley Reading Association. And in Rift Valley Reading Association, we promote literacy in different ways. We are advocating for libraries to be in schools and the stories to be told. I'm also a champion of African storybooks. This is a project from South Africa by a lady called Tessa. She's a late by now, but the company is still on. So we advocate for stories as one of the projects of Rift Valley Reading Association. So my other 3 colleagues went to the other teachers while I took 2 sessions on different days. Yes.
This is fantastic what you're telling us, Geraldine. And I just remembered something you talked to me about once. And you talked about how there was in the past, maybe even recently, a sense in your local community, local environment, local region, that often teaching ideas were being imposed from outside about how teachers should teach. And local teachers didn't have so much of a voice. And you expressed to me that you want to be empowered as a woman, as a local teacher, to share your knowledge. And it seems to me that this is what you are achieving.
Yes, I'm doing that now. And from experience, I find that the older you become in the profession, the more experienced you are. And you don't fear anything anymore because when you are young,
I'm going to have that written over my office door. I love that.
I couldn't agree with you more. I don't care anymore either.
So that is from experience. So you find that you are even teaching your bosses, though they will not agree. They will not agree that you are teaching them, but the silence means that you have something that you are telling them, and they are agreeing with you.
Geraldine and Rasheedat, you are 2 of the most inspiring teachers that I've ever had the honor to I don't even want to say work with, because it feels like we're playing, but it's such an honor. I mean, Rasheedat, I think there's so much resonance between what Geraldine's talking about and your own experience. I mean, is there something that you would like to reflect on that Geraldine's talked about?
Wow. I'm just soaking it all up from her. Experience is the wonderful teacher, and it's beautiful to learn from others' experiences. And I just love listening to her, and I'm amazed at how energetic she is. I mean, she's talking about the fact that she's going to retire soon, but I know that a lot of good things are still coming from Geraldine. When she did talk about the fear, factor, that did resonate with me to an extent. I'm fortunate in that my teaching setting is a bit different. I work in a private school, and we get a little bit more leeway to experiment once, in as much as whoever's on top buys into your idea. And I'm also fortunate in that I'm kind of near the top. I'm the academic coordinator. So I just have one or two people I have to convince that what I'm doing is fine. And but I think it's beautiful in that when I try things out, people can look up to me and feel free to also experiment. I think that's one thing I see, that I can relate to that part of experience, where you're teaching others either consciously or unconsciously. They know you've tried something, you tell them about it, and they're also willing to try either the same thing or something new. And sometimes whatever they try is even better than what I've done. So we're able to learn from each other and build on each other's knowledge. So it's a beautiful experience, coming with new ideas. The storytelling is a totally new idea. I know at a point, I also talked to David about the fact that we do have a set scheme we have to follow. So it may not be easy to use the storytelling fully, but that also did bring about the thought to me that how can I incorporate this? And I thought to myself, okay, grammar is normally a lot of what many people find difficult. How can I use storytelling to teach grammar? And I was able to do that in a lot of cases. And I think it's beautiful that I was able to do that. And I've had the experience of sharing my journey with others. I was so fortunate. I was able to share at a conference, an Elton conference, English Language Teachers Association of Nigeria conference. That was a big hall. We had, I think, at least 400 people in that hall. And even before then, I did attend the Africa LTAC conference online version. And I also shared about storytelling. At a point, it seemed people were really putting me as a storytelling expert, and I wasn't sure I was one. But I think now I'm comfortable enough and experienced enough to kind of own it. Maybe not an expert, but a proud storytelling teacher.
Your presentation was incredible. Absolutely total expertise. And not only did you then present at this conference alongside Geraldine and telling stories alongside you, Geraldine, and other storytellers in Africa who've done, or teachers in Africa who've done the storytelling course, but also then Geraldine contributed to the article that you authored, which has now just been published in the ELTA Africa magazine. And the same article's also been published in the IATEFL Global Issues Special Interest Group magazine, Futurity. And that's just come out a matter of a couple of weeks ago. You're sharing your knowledge now and your expertise. I mean, with that one, Futurity, that is global. That is totally global. It's brilliant.
Thank you. I was so excited to see the article in print. And really, I had a lot of fun writing the article. It took some time for me to get it done, but it helped me to really relive the festival experience. And I had to go back to watch the video, and I was just smiling all through. All the participants were so powerful. I loved how Jack was able to teach us without slides. Geraldine and myself, we had slides, but he brought the teaching like so naturally. And then the stories from all the tellers were just awesome. I felt myself on the Tanzanian, on Kilimanjaro. I was there with with the storyteller, it was such a beautiful experience. And then the introduction of music brought it, gave it that festival atmosphere. And I love that we were even able to invite the participants to tell a story. We had a participant tell a story impromptu. Everything was just so nice. And then going through the recording, going through the chats, picking out some of the things that the audience said, even though I did read it live, just brought a new sense of accomplishment and a sense of we did it. We made a difference. We're making a difference. It was awesome. Thank you.
Fantastic work. Fantastic.
Brilliant. Look, I could sit here all night. I really could.
I just have a strong sense that this is a step, like both of you have indicated. This is not. This is an opening of a new chapter, and we're still at the early stages of this chapter, because I think both of you and many other teachers are now influencing colleagues of the same age, as Geraldine mentioned, but also younger colleagues to consider something they may have dismissed, because it's not just in Africa. This is around the world that people are so attached to technology, and they're thinking everything's got to be online and connectivity and this kind of app and that kind of app. And actually, we just need to remember that we're human beings, and that connection that is formed in a classroom or even outside a classroom under a tree between, I love taking my students out of the classroom and just sitting together on the grass and just being there, just sharing that space. And I think you're bringing something so special. And I think it's kind of an invitation for people to just connect with their heritages, with their humanity. And if we can inspire, like you are, younger teachers and children to realize the power of storytelling, it's just so much potential for a transformation. And if I'm really honest with you, I think the whole way we do education around the world needs transformation, and it needs emotional intelligence, it needs creativity, and storytelling is all about those two things.
Definitely.
And I think, as Geraldine says, we know better, so we're going to do it anyway.